I've been very impressed in my life with a few people. I just think that the job of keeping a publication running is such a high stress, high pressure job that requires somebody with great energy and integrity, somebody who's articulate, meticulous, nimble. There's Katharine Graham at the Washington Post, amazing, iconic woman. There's Perry White, Metropolis, although he totally missed, that Clark Kent just had a pair of glasses on and he was Superman. So those two have always been resonant with me, and recently I've been able to meet yet another amazing editor. So I want to introduce to you from Funworld magazine, the IAPA signature publication, Jeremy Schoolfield. It's all yours.
Thanks, everybody. I first got the email from Steve about this. My reaction internally, kind of sitting at my desk, was something like that. And that was before I found out that I was going to be the last in a panel of SeaWorld completely upending its business model, women's issues, and biases in society. So by comparison, I'm a little weak-kneed up here. And by the way, this picture was taken at the Scare House in Pittsburgh. If any of you have a chance to get there, I highly recommend it. The guy who owns and runs it is a guy named Scott Simmons, and he is an evil genius that you all should know. So he will gladly show you around his haunted, he literally believes it's haunted, former VA building that will scare the living daylights out of you. So, but again, I really just appreciate you guys having me here. It's a big honor for me, and because I've been a fan of this business for my whole life. As far as I know, the first park I ever visited was Busch Gardens, Williamsburg, and the only reason I remember that is because I remember being angry not being tall enough to ride the rides yet. So I had to watch my cousins go, and I just kind of sat there, and at the time I think they had a petting zoo, and that's all I remember from that trip. This right here is my first roller coaster. This is what used to be called the Scooby-Doo at King's Dominion. So this always has a special place in its heart for me. When I go back to King's Dominion, I always ride it, and now I kind of have to sit like this to fit in it, but I can still get on it. But going to theme parks, I grew up in the DC area, so theme parks, the Smithsonian museums, this business has been a ritual of mine for my whole life, and it's only, in the past decade that I've really gotten, since I came to Funworld, that I've gotten to know people like yourselves, and particularly you guys in the TEA. I just love talking to you. There's some people in the audience here that I've interviewed in depth, Keith James and Monty Lundy and Phil Hedema and many others. And what you all do was the thing that I really didn't understand before I started studying and writing about this industry full time. I understood kind of the mechanical parts of putting a ride together. I understood, operating a park kind of basically, but the artistic part of this industry is what has struck me so deeply over the past decade. And so I just want to thank you guys now for the work that you've done and for opening your businesses and your expertise to me and to my staff who have probably pestered you for interviews many, many times. So it really is an honor for me to be here. This is gonna be a little different of a session from basically everything we've done today. And going last, I'm kind of wondering if I'm the relay, the end of the relay that you put a strong guy in, or I'm the number 8 hitter in the baseball lineup. But I guess we'll figure that out as we go along. But basically, I'm just going to talk for a couple of minutes, going to give you a little overview on Funworld, and then we're going to flip this the other way, and hopefully you guys will do most of the talking for the rest of our time together, because what I want to learn from you more today, as I have for my entire time with Funworld. I want to learn how we can make Funworld and trade publications in general in this industry better, and that's what we're here to talk about today. Like I said, I started with Funworld, which is IAPA's official monthly magazine. I started 11 years ago, and the first cover I ever art directed was March 2005, and I'm about to show it to you. I had been on the job less than 6 months, and this should probably come with like a Surgeon General's warning or something. It's really not good, okay? So just prepare yourselves for this next slide. This is, yeah, go ahead, you can laugh, it's okay. This is my buddy, Chris Ozemic, who at the time was working at Worlds of Fun, and we were doing this big innovative story on internet marketing. Doesn't that sound, really exciting now, 11 years later? I'm proud to say Chris is still my buddy after I did this to him, and this is not the reason why he left Worlds of Fun to go join Slitterbond. I can tell you that too. But I have learned a lot, my team has learned a lot over the past decade, and just a couple of months ago, we launched a redesign of Funworld, and this is the current, fast forward 11 years, this is the new and hopefully improved Funworld. This was our March 2016 issue. And really we spent all of 2015 working on this, and what we really wanted to do was give a much cleaner look, easier to read. We know that people are busy. We hear from our readers all the time that, oftentimes they'll kind of save these for a plane trip, or they'll grab it while they're getting coffee or whatever. We wanted to make it easier and cleaner and emphasize the tremendous visuals that this industry provides. So I'm very pleased with the results, but I realize I'm sitting in a room full of artists. So please give me after the conference, or right after I get off stage, please, if you have feedback on what we've done, it's like getting used to a new car. We're going to be tweaking it over the next year and thereafter. So certainly we're proud of what we've done, but it's not set in stone by any means. As IAPA's official magazine, we are the mouthpiece for the association and the industry as a whole. And so we follow, according to IAPA, this is IAPA's official mission statement, and I won't read it for you, but you can see it there. As it translates to Funworld, I think that it's our job to highlight the people, products, projects, and best practices. Say that 5 times fast. I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget. People, products, projects, and best practices that push this industry forward. We want to highlight the best and the brightest at every level, at every type of job, every conceivable way that people impact this industry. That's what we want to highlight. Our goal, we have about 34,000 readers per month, and our goal is that, if you crack open our pages, no matter where you look, you're going to at least find something that either helps you in your job, inspires you, just kind of uplifts you in some way. Whether it's learning how to accomplish a task better, or just seeing what someone else has done and thinking about how you can adapt that for your own purposes and incorporate it into your own work. And so that's really why I'm here, is what's the best way for Funworld to do this? How do we accomplish that goal? Because as Kyle and I and Steve and I were kind of going through this presentation, and we really wanted to talk about how negative stories are covered in the attractions industry press, or really how they're not covered. Because I'll tell you flat out, you're not going to read negative stories in Funworld. We're not going to be editorializing. We're not going to be criticizing anyone in this industry ever. We are a member-driven publication, and we have about 5,000 member companies around the world, which when you factor in places like Walt Disney World Resort and Disneyland Resort are members of ours, you're talking about potentially tens of thousands of people throughout the year, throughout the globe, interacting with IAPA. So it's our job to support all of you in any way that we can. And to this point, we don't feel like publishing critical articles that are critical of our own members is the best way to do that. That's not to say, though, that we don't ever publish articles about negative stories. Right outside our doors here, when Disney's California Adventure was being redone, I did a series of articles on this billion-dollar project that is now complete. And I interviewed first Jay Rizzullo, and you can see here Tom Staggs and many other Imagineers and executives with Disney, and they were pretty frank in saying that when California Adventure opened in 2001, they learned pretty quickly that it didn't fulfill the expectations that the guests were looking for. They heard that feedback, and this new California adventure was their way of answering that feedback and sort of having a course correction. In a similar way, you may have already gotten it, but it certainly should be waiting for you when you get back to your offices. This is the April 2016 cover, which I did a story on Cedar Fair and all the changes that they've made since Matt We Met, who used to be the president here at Disneyland, since he came on board as their president and CEO in 2012. And I interviewed a lot of their top execs, and they were equally candid about how they felt that their company had lost its way in certain respects, and how over the past 4 years they've done a lot to fix those missteps, and are really excited about the future. So we do run articles like that. We just don't. They have to be generated by the members. So those were stories that I call Funworld a partnership with our members. If we're doing a story with you, I view it as a partnership between the two of us, and we want to tell the story as best we can, and inform the rest of the industry what you're doing and what you're about. And so when we have stories like that, I love them, but they do have to kind of start at that level, and the source has to be willing to go with us on that story. So, for instance, Funworld has not written a single line of copy about SeaWorld in the Blackfish scenario. That has not appeared in our pages. We're hoping to, with this new business model and the new programs that SeaWorld's starting up, I'm starting to talk with them about getting a story on that. But that's just an example of what Funworld's not about. So with that set up, the goal here is for me to listen to you guys, to conduct essentially like a big group interview. This will be the biggest group interview I've ever done, for sure. But we're gonna have some mics out in the audience again, and I just have a series of questions here that really is getting at this topic of how can Funworld better cover some of these touchy issues without coming out as seeming against the industry or saying something negative against the industry. So that's a point of journalistic tension that I've dealt with for basically my entire career with Funworld, and I would love and hope that you would give me some feedback on how I can do that better. I really want to so we don't take up too much time, I really want to jump right to, Kyle's going to help too, we're going to jump right to question 3 there. If you guys have some thoughts, how would you, get right down to it, how would you like to see Funworld handle subject matter that could be perceived as negative for the industry? That's the first question. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
And before we do, can I just underscore this question, because we had a little conversation about this beforehand as we were curating this conversation. I'm very clear on the realities of membership-sponsored publications versus Daily Variety or Hollywood Reporter or anything else. So the concern underlying creating this segment today is what I perceive as an information gap. I just came back from most of the last 4 years in Dubai, and a lot of our daily entertainment is reading press releases from the various development companies about how their parks are going to open Friday, and then they're going to open next June, and then they're going to open, and this goes on and on and on. It's a laugh. And what rankles me, candidly, is that our trade publications publish those press releases as though they're true. We do. TEA, all of them. Blue Loop, all of them. And I'm like, well, hold on. How is this supporting the industry? Yet you don't want to be tearing down membership. But then what happens is the New York Times quotes something published in the TEA publications as fact. But we know it's not going to happen. We know there are several projects in Dubai, just to pull a country out of the hat, that are poised for failure or shortfall. They're not going to happen, and they're not going to happen as advertised. So to me, I'm like, well, where is I want to be careful with the word integrity, but where's the truth of this, and where can it go if it can't go here? Because I understand this. So I just wanted to add this to the mix because it was too calm.
And I will say directly to what Kyle just said, Funworld, we learned a lot from what happened in Dubai, 6 or 7 years ago when all those projects, or many of those projects, never came to fruition. We adopted a policy from then that we've hopefully stuck to this whole time, in that we are only going to talk about projects that at least have shovels in the ground. That's the new standard that we've set for ourselves. We might mention it in a blurb or something, but to actually do a real story on something, they have to have shovels in the ground. And you'll see in the April issue, we did a story on the American Dream Complex in New Jersey. And that was something that's been talked about for years and years and years, but finally now there's shovels in the ground, and they're actually building something. Hopefully it opens. But so we covered it then, because we feel like at least if you have dirt moving, something is happening. It's not just some rendering in a presentation somewhere. So that's kind of the new standard that we've set.
So answers for Jeremy? Hands? Back there?
I don't know how the culture works in some of the other countries, but I would think over here people within the industry would be willing, if somebody's going to write about something, let somebody offer something where they made the mistake that everybody can learn from. That way at least they're coming out and it sets a precedence for everybody else to do the same.
Kelly?
So I think a little bit launching off what you just said, Kyle, there is, again, I think it's because information is all about how fast we can get out there. The minute a press release comes across someone's desk, you just publish it. And I'd love to see some journalistic research done. Obviously, this is a group of people. We all work together. We collaborate on different projects. I'm always amazed at how one company will suddenly be credited for everything just because they got permission to get their release out first. And with just a couple phone calls, it'd be so easy for the journalist to credit the wider group of people that were involved, even though maybe they didn't have permission to put a press release out. And that sort of thing. And I think that ends up being really good for the membership as a whole.
I will tell you, that is something we struggle with. It is difficult, especially for major projects. It does give me, it keeps me up at night that we're crediting these people, but not everyone. And they're, for some of these major projects, these gigantic facilities that are going up in Asia. How do you know, and how do you make sure that you have everybody that had a piece of that? How do you get them all credit? And I don't have an answer for you, but that is a serious thing that we try to do our best with, but it is challenging, especially when in certain circumstances the facility itself is kind of reticent to release all the names that were involved, and then again we run into that. Well, who are we trying to work with here? You're all our members. You're all our readers. We want to do right by everybody, and it gets real sticky.
Pat?
As a former trade magazine editor and publisher, I certainly sympathize with your position. However, I do think that there is a journalistic responsibility to ask the tough questions in editorials and in op-ed pieces. And I would encourage you to, you don't have to say it yourself. It doesn't have to be your opinion, but there's certainly plenty of people who you can interview who would say to you, well, that job in Genting Highlands isn't going to open in 2016. It's, or anything like that. Or maybe Dubai's headed for another bubble. I think there is a role that you could effectively play.
Mm-hmm. All over here?
Yeah. The one comment you said about best practices was a really good comment, because I'm always confused of whether this is a business association or a community of practice, or both. But it's the community of practice of how we do our job better. We have to do critical questions and issues. And of course we don't name and blame, nor do we want the Chinese press and where you have to read between the lines. But can we pose it as an industry question? Can we get hypotheticals out there? Can we look at the practice of how we solve problems that we know are out there without having to shame and blame within the journal integrity of the magazine.
There are a couple other hands back here, as long as, thank you.
Yeah, I just want to point out that I just got your new issue yesterday prior to leaving to the airport, and I usually sits on my desk for a week or so, sometimes longer, before I get
We
to
understand.
it. But yesterday, I was loading my briefcase I said, well, maybe I'll put on and take it to the plane and read it. So I flipped it open. It was so compelling. The new format is great. I
Thank you.
read the whole thing before I even left the office. So you're to be commended on the design decisions you made. It's very nice format.
Thank you very much.
But there's your next cover story.
I also feel a butt coming.
To Pat's point, I do think there is a journalistic responsibility as well. And I like the idea of making an op-ed an editorial opinion. That's a two-edged sword because there are sour grapes in all industries and stuff like that. But to Chris's point, again, I also agree that if we just ask questions, we as the membership are intelligent enough to go fill in the blanks. So, good job, though.
Questions, answers, opinions? Come on. Oh, there's one. Great.
I think I would agree with Kelly and Pat. I think I would actually take a firmer stance. I think that without criticism, you can't have a good product. And I think so many of these publications have just become advertisements. And I think it's a shame. You know, we're artists. We're supposed to learn from each other. And I think the only way to do that is to criticize each other. You know, because that's how you live when you're in art school, for instance. You sit around and you have critiques, right? This worked. This didn't work. This is the reason why it does work. That's too purple. This is too pink, right? And we need that dialogue, and that doesn't exist in this world. It's very
100
important.
Yeah, guest column. 100 years ago, in some of the early summits, we actually had conversations about, I don't know if we use the word policing, but sort of as a guild, watching our colleagues, the projects they were building, kind of how can we explored the question, we couldn't come up with an answer, but how can we keep other projects on the right track? How can we advise people in other countries? How can we keep our peers and colleagues to a standard that we can all be proud of? And the conversation just died. And now this is the same conversation up again. It's like we're a big global organization. We have really powerful press. Maybe this is one way, or maybe we need another publication, or how do we make sure that somebody has their eye on, an objective eye on, our industry, so that what we're talking about is fact. Over here.
It's funny you should say that because that very topic has come up again recently with the TEA and the International Board about where our role is in this particular discussion as far as how do we keep everybody on the same page and working together, making the same statements, playing together in an ethical field. But I'm afraid that just like in years past, the same is going to happen. So I think it's something that we do need to kick further down the road. I think we need to take a harder look at it.
This led me kind of to the fourth question down here. I'm wondering, if anyone in the audience would be willing to, I kind of posed it more specifically here. If you were involved with a project that went belly up, or didn't come through to fruition before when it was supposed to, how would you specifically want to see that reflected in the pages of Funworld, and kind of, even if you had an example of, if you wanted to share an example of a project like that, how you would have liked to see that covered in our pages. Anybody?
Answer? Oh, right here.
The answer lies in projects per se, because that becomes a little personal and subjective, but I certainly do think that it's applicable in technical applications, creative solutions, and things of that nature. When we start talking about projects, the politics involved in it too often are not one-sided, but our perception of them are, and that's a danger. And I don't know how you. I try and be a fair person. I don't know how you can present a balanced view. it's a slippery slope.
Therein lies the problem.
Oh, back there.
I'm going to piggyback on what Bob was starting to say. I think the other problem is also most of us who work on the project are under an NDA. So how much can we talk about? Even if a project goes horribly wrong, we're still bound by the NDA. So, and to Kelly's point earlier, I'm on a myriad of project teams under other companies where my logo does not appear anywhere on the packages. And again, I'm under an NDA. So we can't necessarily say we were involved. We don't have visibility to the outside world or to the industry. And so I think it's really difficult to answer all of these questions on a project basis.
So given that scenario, how do you think, what I'm looking here for is solutions.
Yeah.
You know, given that scenario, do you have any recommendations for me as to how I could approach something like that given those specific circumstances?
I think that you should look at the primary stakeholder, the audience. And being an audience advocate, designers are that audience advocate, and it directly relates to the bottom line and return on investment on how good that product is. And I think that the biggest issue in through time is seeing decisions deflate the potential of any creative product based upon decisions, poor decisions, that can be used as lessons learned, not naming names. Mm-hmm. But if we find out from the audience point of view, get some real data, because that's the only thing that's going to, in the end, change things, is that it hits the ROI. Are we able to get more audience data from responses and correlate data as far as what audiences are expecting, what do they get, and looking at that as a lesson learned, and then we can look at that as professionals and say, well, why did that happen? Why is this good? Why is this not bad? And work with that.
If I may, it's a huge opportunity here, and I don't have the answer either, but the notion of learning from failures is huge. Something Keith said this morning, Universal Florida, when it opened, there was lots of challenges in that, and perhaps, maybe I'm making this up, but there's enough water under the bridge that conversation could happen.
Piggybacking on what Chris was just saying, you know, I think it might have been you were talking about projects going belly up and things like that. You know, we're all in a field where projects go on hold all the time, and then they can reappear 5 years later. You know, you don't want to ever burn any of those bridges, and as Lisa said, we're all under NDAs almost all of the time. But once a project has opened, to be able to do a study, when they're really successful and when they're not, take Hard Rock Park, for example. Mm-hmm. After a couple years, to do some visitor surveys and kind of relook at the landscape and talk to some of the feasibility guys and kind of put together something that, again, just helps educate. It goes back to, you know, what we learned sort of thing. Ends up really helping everyone reading your article without throwing anyone under the bus. Mm-hmm. One of the challenges some of us as designers have is we'll get brought in for the early concept package, give me the big idea, do the pretty pictures. Now I'm going to go off and do something. There's been press on you being the designer, but by the time it opened, it was nowhere near what you had ever advised the client to do or whatever, but suddenly you are linked to it, and it's a bit of a failure. And you know, so then we're all cringing, oh, please let there be no press on that project that people saw 3 years ago that I had. I see Phil Hedema just shaking his head up and down. We've all been there. So it does end up being a slippery slope, but I have to believe, even if you went back and talked to whoever that preliminary designer was, they're still going to tell you, yeah, we only took it to this far, and then I don't know what happened next, but here's the guy it was handed off to, and you should talk to them. Mm-hmm. And because we all do want to know why did they make these new decisions that took it so far off the rails, and it's good for everyone. And I think it will increase your readership too.
We're going to continue this. I just ask you to do first. I'm going to do two things. One is thank Jeremy. So, everybody thank Jeremy. We're not done. I'm going to continue your conversation, but as I do, I'm going to bring Anthony and Clay and Melinda back up because for 30 minutes we have everybody available for Q&A. But let's continue with this, okay?
I just wanted to say there's one other aspect of this that we didn't get to quite yet. That is, Funworld, I know specifically gets sourced by mainstream press all the time. It happens all the time. They'll either use us on background, to spark their own stories, or they'll directly quote our stories in their own stories. I even had one offshoot of Yahoo last year basically take our entire May issue and put it on a web page. I was fine with it. They credited us. It was good publicity for us. But we do know that the mainstream press is watching what we do, and the fear is if we start talking about things that are negative, the fear is that the mainstream press will pick up on those threads, and that might lead them down paths that they wouldn't have gone in the first place. That is something that we keep kind of in the back of our minds. So.
Right here. Microphone.
Going back to the lessons learned, not lessons learned, I'm sorry, what you could do. I mean, I've worked for a couple different companies in my experience where luckily in a couple different projects and a few of those projects have gone bad, not because of me, but because it was a group of people. There was more than one person responsible for what went wrong. But most of those companies, they keep records of this. They'll do a lessons learned, and it's a document. It's filed away. I know LDI, for example, does that. The Lean Institute probably has those. It doesn't have to be entertainment as a whole, but they do entertainment projects. So you maybe contact them.
Over here.
What I'm always looking for is an authoritative voice. Somewhere where I can go and say, okay, here's a storehouse of information that is looking at existing trends. Are they valid? Future issues? How do we deal with them? And I think that that's what this whole, that's why there's an elephant behind you, is because this is an issue. All of these things are issues that, as an industry, we need to look at. And as somebody myself who's trying to bootstrap a major project, I'm looking for all of the pitfalls that I don't want to step in, because everyone else in the room is way too busy to have a personal conversation about this. So you're in a unique position to do, like, for want of a better example, do an Aaron Brockovich. Go out and find the problem, identify it, and without naming names and saying, oh, well, this went wrong, and so this is why, you're talking about the same kinds of things that all the other presenters are. You're saying, what about handicapped issues? How are they being dealt with? Are they being dealt with at all? What are the best practices? How is the self-driving automobile going to affect parking lots, and what is that going to do with land use? How are green laws and the materials that we're using in attractions and in operations going to be affected, and how might that impact future projects? So to me, there's an opportunity for Funworld to be a fairly unique, authoritative voice going out and identifying things that we all just don't have the time to come together as a group and do.
So I have a suggestion that I haven't really thought through yet, but just an idea for you. So Steve Alcorn's book on theme park design, he guides you through the process where you design your virtual theme park. Why not have a virtual project that maybe runs through a series of magazines and invite people that are involved in the different stages of designing and building an attraction to comment on their stage of that project. So you could have all of the people on the panel here comment on things to think about at this stage of the project. You can have all the people in this room comment on things to think about at this stage of the project, and it could be a series that people could engage with.
That leads, I know we're going to open the Q&A up broader, but just I wanted to say, please, is Jerry Maguire too old of a movie to reference now? I mean, it's 20 years old, but you know, help me help you, okay? You have my email address is really easy. It's just the first letter of my first name, J, followed by my last name, Schoolfield, which you have in your program, at iaapa.org. Please email me suggestions if you'd like to write an op-ed. I know like nothing better than when people from the industry offer to, you know, contribute to the magazine, because all it does is raise our credibility. It gets more engagement. So if you have more ideas along these lines as you go home, you know, flying home, think about it more. I want Funworld to be the best it could possibly be because it's for you guys. You guys pay my salary. So I want it to be as good as it can be, and I need your help with that. So that's just kind of my last plea, if you would.